It is time for God Talk. I'm Father Richard, along with my friend Tony LaGuardia, or as I call him, Tony Lombardi, the life coach. Anyway, we were talking before we actually went on the air, and thank you for that. It was therapeutic, which when you have a problem, when you have a difficulty, and you have someone that you trust, you just don't talk to anybody. That's the important thing. Sure. And it's got to be done in confidence because you don't need somebody to gossip about you. But when you have that person that you can trust and you can confide in, and sometimes it's got to be somebody that's not part of your family circle, it's always a great thing to do, to have somebody to talk to confide in, to share your trials and tribulations and your victories as well. Because let's face it, if every time we got together it was always gloom and doom, we would just like, I don't want to go over there. It's always like a horrible story. I mean, who wants to hear that? And I try to always, to the best of my ability, Tony, I try to be as happy as I can possibly be.
I think you do.
And a lot of times, honestly, I have to fake it.
Okay.
All right. So,
at least you're honest about it.
Yeah, I have to fake it. But I find in the process of faking it, putting on the smile or just acting like you got nothing wrong or nothing to worry about, somehow by the end of the day, you get through it and then you're like, you know what? It was a good idea to fake it because I'm not in a bad mood. I didn't bring that home with me. In our life work and our homework, the two things that we got to do is not bring our home problems to work and our work problems to home. You just need that way of decompressing. So when I get here at work, here's what I do. And we'll talk about some of the things that you want to talk to us about today. Here's what I do. I get in, and if there's something that's pressing, that's got to be done right away because of time constraints for the radio station, I get those done right away. You just
get them off your plate.
Right. A lot of people say we got to pray first. Well, I do that. As soon as I get up, I have some prayers. But then after I get done those pressing things, if there are any, I start doing my morning prayer rule, which is morning prayer followed by what we call hours. So everybody's got a little bit different types of things to do, a different way of praying. I'm a priest, so I have different responsibilities. I don't only pray for myself, but I pray for the church and the needs of others. And when you do pray for the needs of others, when you tell someone you're going to pray for them, make sure you do it because it's kind of a crappy thing to make that promise and not follow through.
It's an important promise.
Yeah. And we were talking about some very serious issues, but why not focus on what this is all about, sharing your life with Christine, suffering the loss, how you took that loss and made it into as a positive as you possibly can, because it's definitely negative, right?
It is, but as you just said, I'm trying to show and tell others out of something so horribly sad and devastating that I'm sharing my experiences with Christine and how especially she lived in our relationship to try to give others not only hope, but to show them, in my opinion, a way to live. Mm-hmm. And not only in your relationship as a married couple, but also with your relationship with God.
You know, we as men, sometimes we will get on the topic, and not to be locker room, but we talk about sex, right? A lot of people think about it, talk about it, and as far as the church is concerned, sex is between married people to each other, you know.
Right.
It's confined to the marriage, not outside of the marriage. And we were just talking about, you know, relationships and our lives. And when you think about if you're in a marriage and you lose that loved one, and this is just real guy talk, so excuse us for saying, and this is really profound. You don't think about the sexual relationship. You think about the real relationship. Sure, I mean, the sexual relationship is important. It's, you know, part of our marriage, but the times that you had together outside of the bedroom, or maybe sometimes those little talks that you had, but these kind of things, you think that you'd miss that sexual relationship, but you find that when you look back, it's so much more than that. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know people, especially during the holidays coming up, they get all lonely,
right?
And they feel like they miss the physical part of the relationship, they miss the mental part, the true presence, and you can get into a real negative cycle that way, and it can be really brutal. So as we move along, and just was on the top of my head, we'll deal with that subject as we get closer to like Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that. But it's been over a year since you lost Christine in August. August, what was the date?
14th.
14th.
Of 2018.
Right. And, it took you to around January, I think, before you and I finally got to talk at some length.
We wanted to do this for a while, but I was not really ready before that time to talk about it.
You and I, we were, it's kind of weird how all of this stuff works. Like everything happens for a reason, how God works. And we got this book that you gave me, and we'll get to that a little later on, about suffering. My job as a hospice chaplain, soon after the loss of a loved one, I'm supposed to call up the family and say, look, on behalf of the hospice, I just want to extend my condolences. If there's any way that you think we can help, please let us know. We're here to support you. All of those things that you're supposed to say. I only say I can only imagine how you feel because I don't know how you feel.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I try not to say, I know how you feel because I know I don't. And, all I can say is I'm sorry for your loss, and I will pray for your loved one. Those are all comforting things. But then you and I had a very funny, interaction right from the day one. I think I didn't park in the right place. I might have knocked on the wrong door.
Yes.
I finally get in there. I call you Lombardi as opposed to LaGuardia. I'm getting the names wrong. And then Christine passes away. I call you about 5 days later. The policy is call right away. I'm like, I don't think so. Let me deal with this my way because
which was good. It worked for me too.
Right? I mean, because I know when you experience the loss right away, things happen at a real fast pace because a lot of people will interact with you immediately, and there's a lot of things that you have to do. A lot of plans have been made, and then you got to put these plans into motion, and it's really crazy. And then a couple of days after, people start disappearing. So I figured, you know what, 5 days is really good. Now let me call Tony.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a nice little conversation, and we get off the phone. And then I get you mixed up with somebody else who passed away, and I call you again, and you're like, Tony? I'm like, darn it, Tony. What the? I'm so sorry. I mean, this got to. You must think I'm an idiot. I'm calling the wrong person about someone
passing.
Yeah, someone else's passing. And then I realized at that point, I go, you know what? Tony and I have a really interesting connection here. And I just had a sense that, because we're in the same town,
right?
We'll be seeing each other. And I think that, in all of that, and the reason why I'm saying it, because it's all horrible stuff, but there's some humor in all of that. I guess God sent me as a comic relief in so many ways. If I was in your shoes, wow, Father Richard is out of his mind. What is wrong with this guy? But it's not that there's anything wrong with me. It's just that I have my way, and I think that we all have to be.
And I was comfortable. I am comfortable with it, so it works for both of us.
So it works, and then it
might not work for everyone, right?
No.
But it works for me.
There's only very, I guess God will send you. God matches us up with people that, especially if we're on the same trying to seek God,
mm-hmm.
I think there's a way that they put us together, and that's what happened here. But I'm really grateful of that. We've become really good friends over that, and I think that, I like to think that, wow, Christine's probably going, I'm glad those two were hanging out, talking.
Sure. Yes.
Yesterday, I was driving past your house. I'm like, I swear, you just call first. I'm like, I'm not the kind of guy.
Just stop
all right,
in.
So next time I could just stop in.
Absolutely.
All right, great, because I have a problem with calling first.
I'm there.
I'm down in front.
My car.
Okay,
right.
So let's discuss some of the things about making the most of our time.
Good. During the time leading up to our podcast, whether it's the weekend before or the few days before or the week before, things come to me, and through, through a life situation, or if I'm in a situation, whether it's at work or with, hanging out with a friend of mine or whatever, and things will come to me, and I kind of jot them down because I think they're important, not only for me to help me understand what I'm going through, but I like to share it with everyone on the podcast, and including you, Father Rich, because as you said earlier, we talked a little bit before today's podcast about what's going on in both of our lives. And a few things that came to mind that I wrote down that I wanted to bring to our listeners were, I heard a song that, and I really feel that a lot of times things come to me through music and songs, and they're given to me by Christine because her love of music was so, she just loved all types of music, and I feel she sends me messages sometimes through these songs. And the one song was called Waiting Till Tomorrow. And it kind of, the story behind it and the lyrics with it are basically saying, don't put off till tomorrow what you can enjoy today.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And the master of that, or who wrote that book, was my wife. Because, boy, cancer didn't matter. Nothing mattered to Christine except enjoying the moment. Now that I want to be very clear on that, because not every day in everyone's life, we all have bad days, including Christine. Although I didn't really see many, to be honest. But even when she would, she always looked on the bright side of things, always. And that alone is making me change the ways of my life, because, my life, of course, is quite different now, being alone, basically.
And an empty nester on top of everything else.
With my son going away to college, and,
your daughter's married.
The weekends come, and during the week and the evenings come, and, I for so many years, many years, we're used to having a house with kids, and even just, with Christine and myself. So I'm learning from her ways, and I want to share that with everyone, because you alone only have the control over what you can do. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, how do you do that? I do it simply by thinking of Chris and her amazing way of life. Also, what I want to put out there that also plays into this, in my opinion, is knowing the power of God. You see, Christine had an uncanny way of bringing her faith into her life, and I just hope that, people understood that, and that's one reason why that I'm here doing this, because if whoever she touched didn't understand that, I want to make sure they know that no matter how good or bad Christine's days were, from her younger days to her older days, where going through cancer or not, she had such a strong faith that made every day a good day for her, even when it wasn't. So the message that I'm sending is that I'm trying to live every day more like that. Do I do it consistently? Not really, but when I'm not having a good day, I look up to her and I reach out to her and say, Chris, you know what? I'm going to try to have a good day because I know you would. And, that's a real important message that I want to get across to everyone today. And those are just some notes that I wrote down. I have some others, but I just wanted to throw that out to you, Father Rich, and get your feelings on that.
Well, see, I think people get confused as making the most of every day or the most of your time, meaning that you're going to go out and have a lot of fun.
No.
And cross things off on your bucket list. That's not what that's about.
That's not what it's about.
Living life to the fullest, in my view, in my wisdom, is having a close relationship with God, because that is as full as it gets. Now, we talked about this. You can have a bank account in heaven or a bank account in hell. And if your bank account in hell is more than what you have in your bank account in heaven, you got to switch banks, right?
That's it.
I learned that from the great Billy Graham. He's a great evangelist. And it makes a lot of sense, because we have to focus on eternal rewards. Not everything is going to be here.
Right.
And you can't bring it all with you. You just can't. When you leave, you go. Right? Your body is put in the ground, your spirit goes. We're all immortal. We're all eternal. And I think too many people get stuck in this world instead of living for God and living for and aiming towards heaven. These are the higher heights. These are the goals. When you're a little kid and what do you want to be when you grow up? It's always, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a fireman, which are all great things. I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a soldier, I want to be a sailor. All great things. I want to be a priest, I want to be a nun. Very few people say that. Great things. But what I think that when we ask that question, the answer that we should try to get our children to think about, when I grow up, I want to be a saint. I want to be saintly. That is the attribute. That's what we should strive for. And part of that is relationship with God and also understanding the concept of love. Kind of like talked a little bit about it, but what is love? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is forbearing. Love is not holding grudges. Love is for being forgiving. When you can, love your enemies as yourself and pray for your enemies, you can do a lot, and it benefits you. People are fighting on Facebook, on social media, and in the news media over, let's just say, and it's a hot topic, the President of the United States. I mean, everybody's fighting over this guy, pro or con. And here's the thing. I really think if you hate that person who is in the White House, so much so it consumes all of your time, who are you really harming? You're harming yourself.
Absolutely.
If you start to pray for that person that's in the White House, especially if you're a Christian, this is your duty and obligation to pray for your enemies, to pray for people that persecute you, to pray for your government. I'll take you back in the Bible. Jesus had a problem with the Pharisees and Sadducees, the church. He did not really take on Pilate too much. If you look at the conversation, he wasn't really concerned of the government. He wasn't really concerned about Caesar. And when they ask, who do you pay the tax to? Well, give me a coin. What's on the coin? Give to Caesar what's Caesar's and God to what is God. Mm-hmm. Caesar wasn't a very nice guy. I mean, there were some Caesars where most people think Julius Caesar, but there's more than Julius Caesar. You have Augustus, and there was Caligula, and Julius. I had a bunch of different Caesars in the Roman Empire, and it's just the way it was. And it was bad enough being oppressed by that government, but on top of that, the temple system. So he had to overturn all of these things. And you start to realize that God is in your heart. It's not something that is written in stone and all of these things. Those are all important things. But, don't hate people. Right. Don't waste your time fighting with people on social media and Facebook and comparing yourself to others. Well, pray for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm going to say next kind of plays into what you're talking about. People, for the most part, from what I've seen, seem to go along with a lifestyle that they are comfortable with, or that what they've been taught or what they've experienced. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's bad, but there are some life situations when you're growing up or even at an older age where sometimes it's up to you to break the cycle, I call it. And what I mean by that is if you're brought up a certain way, or you're going through a situation where, it could be anything. It could be an addiction to drugs or to alcohol or to many things. You have to make a conscious effort for yourself to not want to do that and break that cycle. And I'll bring up for instance here, an example of how I feel Christine and I broke a cycle. And it made us so close in a way that, is very special, where we both came from homes as younger people that parents were divorced. So it was just, you could say that, people who come from a home that's with divorce, they have a chance of getting divorced. Well, when Chris and I were going out together and then got engaged, it was very important to us to be conscious of that, to not bring a family up in a household where the parents would eventually get divorced. And we made sure that it was an effort on both of our parts to have a loving relationship and make our family first, to break that cycle. And we did. And we were always very proud of that. So the message that I'm trying to get across is, if there's something that you see or you're going through in your life that kind of seems normal, but again, you think back and you say, well, it's normal, but it's not really right. It's up to you to try to change it. Make that conscious effort to break that cycle if it's a negative cycle. And I think that's important. I think that plays into what we're kind of talking about.
Yep. And one of those things you can do to break the cycle, and, I come from a Christian background, Orthodox background, and we have what we call a prayer rule. And it's really important to develop one. And then you start small. It could be morning prayer, afternoon prayer, night prayer, reading the scriptures, or like in this book you have Jesus' Calling, which will read something out of that. And you got to stick to it. Even, there are even priest friends of mine who have problems sticking with their prayer rule. And then as a result, they end up in all kinds of trouble, right? All these frustrations and all of these things start to crop up. So I'll go back and I'll say, well, look, how about this? Why don't you just reboot? Why don't you just start small again and rebuild, and we'll be responsible for each other, and we'll text back and forth. When you do the morning prayer, when you do the evening prayer, do what you can, Get in the habit of going in prayer first. I mean, we read about these lives in the saints. Their lives are full of prayer. I mean, they did everything out of prayer. Another thing, when we're faced with a problem, instead of trying to solve it right away on our own, rely on God. And this is where we go right into this. This is fantastic.
This I brought in this morning because this is a book that I go to every morning because it's dated. There's dates on each reading. So I wanted to bring it in to Father Rich, and he's going to read it for everyone because this is important to hear because I actually witnessed this from Christine.
Yeah, this is really good.
So go ahead.
Be prepared to suffer for me, in my name. All suffering has meaning in my kingdom. Pain and problems are opportunities to demonstrate your trust in me, bearing your circumstances bravely, even thanking me for them, is one of the highest forms of praise. This sacrifice of thanksgiving rings golden-toned bells of joy throughout heavenly realms. On earth also, your patient suffering sends out ripples of good tidings in ever-widening circles. When suffering strikes, remember that I am sovereign, and I can bring good out of everything. Do not try to run for pain or hide from problems. Instead, accept adversity in my name, offering it up to me for my purposes. Thus your suffering gains meaning and draws you closer to me. Joy emerges from the ashes of adversity through your trust and thankfulness. And let me just give you an assignment on top of that. You can rewind and listen to this again. Read James 1, 2-4, and Psalms 107, 21-22. So it's beautiful. I mean, it gives us some hope, and it makes us understand how we could rely on God to get through these sufferings and how it brings us closer to God.
It does. And I just want to bring up the fact, and I said it before you read it, I witnessed that with Christine. So, the words are one thing, the reading is another, but to actually witness it, where Chris put her faith in God through all of her pain and suffering and really, really did that. And for me to be by her side and witness it, boy, was that so special. And I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that and appreciated it.
Yeah, and we're all going to encounter suffering in this life.
Yes,
and somebody else's suffering isn't any less suffering than what you might be going through. So everybody in their own way. When you look at somebody, you go, you call that suffering? That's when you start to get into a downward slope that you just don't want to, you don't. There's physical suffering, which is painful, right? Mm-hmm. But you have pain medications for those. Sometimes you can have a really bad cold. Again, you can have some cold medications. But what about what's the medicine for when you're suffering emotionally and it's manifesting itself physically, or perhaps you're, just you just the devil likes to confuse you and confound you and make you think that there's no God, and then you'll start to like, well, I got to get rid of this stress. So then you start to do bad things like, a drinking problem where you smoke too much, or you get involved in this, that, or the other unwholesome thing. And then before you know it, the devil has you convinced that you're not salvageable, and there's no sense in even trying to go back to church or any of those things because you're a goner. It's too late, and it's never really too late to turn it around.
Never too late.
And say this, suicide is not an option. It goes against the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. So you're killing yourself. I can't say that, you go to hell as a result, but, you're under God's judgment, and I wouldn't want to stand before that throne and say, wondering what's going to happen. Might not work out in your favor. That's all I'm saying. And even if, you make it to heaven, you're going to lose rewards for that. David, the King David, after he sinned with Bathsheba, and he repented because Nathan comes to him and goes, you know what, you're trying to hide this. God knows exactly what you did, and you're going to pay the penalties. The relationship was never the same, so he lost reward. He kind of, not that, he lost favor of God. God still loved him, but as a result of his actions, there were the consequences. And these consequences were long-term consequences. And they still, in many ways, affect us today, right? Sure. The consequences of Adam and Eve affect us today. So the things that you do can affect generations after you. And you think it's, I'm only one person. Well, one person can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And here's the other thing. We talked about this. And, Tony is sharing a very private part of his life and trying to be of service to others and minister to others through this Thank God podcast in memory and to honor his wife, Christine. Just think about this. If there is an issue that you are made aware of, and let's say it's really hard for rich people to get in heaven, right? Very hard. The United States, we're one of the richest bunch of people you ever meet in your life. I mean, even the poor amongst us have it better off than some people in Africa. Oh, here we go, bringing up people in Africa, and they're 6,000 miles away. I mean, all right. But I've seen poor people with gigantic smiles on their face with their little doggies. I mean, that you got to. That's what you want to be. You want to be able to be carefree and hold your puppy and go, "Oh, great puppy," And even though you're surrounded by mud, you're still like happy about your surroundings and you're happy who you are, and you get this joy from God that nobody can rob from you.
Yes.
That's the one thing that nobody can ever take is your faith. I think it's worth dying for, as a matter of fact. I rather die as a Christian than live as a pagan, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's how much it means to me. I would rather, I hear confessions, and I'm bound by the seal of confessions. There's no way they're getting any of that out of me. They'll have to kill me. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't care what you do to me. It's not going to happen. And also, God knows my limits, so I'd be taken before I would reach those limits. I trust in God that he would know. So I'm just telling you right now, I say that full of faith. I'm not looking to get killed, but I'm not afraid to die for my faith, And then you kind of have to have that fearless kind of way about you, and not afraid that, you got to really, when you get that trust in God, you sort of like, okay, all right, I got this. But living a Christian is really rough, and being a rich person is really tougher because it's really hard for rich people to get into heaven. Now, how can you be rich? This is always the ancient question. How do you be rich and yet make it into the kingdom of heaven? First, it's faith in Christ, right? Then it's using your blessings to bless others. When you see a need, don't even give it a second thought. Because you know something, you have that much, you'll always be given more. I mean, as long as you're using it correctly, it's when you use your riches for ill-gotten gains, yes, or for only yourself and for selfish reasons, you're going to pay for that.
Yes.
You might not think, you're going to laugh, but you might not think, but you ultimately will pay. And so many stories of people on their deathbed are consumed with grief and horror because they didn't live the life that they should have lived, and it was just too late for them in their mind to make a change, which up until you take your last breath, there's the opportunity to embrace Christ. And even I don't know what happens on that split second, could be an eternity, you probably still get given another chance. I don't know how that works because, none of us have been in that situation, and nobody's coming back to tell us, right? As far as we know. Anyway, so there's some things to contemplate. You mentioned many times there's sometimes you go home and you feel lonely. So what would your advice be to somebody who feels lonely? Get a dog. I was going to tell you to get a dog. Do you have a dog?
That helps. No, I don't.
You should maybe get a dog.
No, I reach out to some others, friends or
if
family.
you have a dog, I might visit unexpectedly more often because I'm not allowed to have a dog. But I envy everybody who does have a dog.
Reaching out to friends or family in a phone call, that usually helps. Or just trying to find something to fill my time.
Yeah. Keeping busy is a good thing.
Oh, it's
you don't
great.
want to be idle.
Absolutely. No, not at all.
Yeah.
Work is a great distraction.
Yeah. I've heard that from people. Work. I'm like, hey, pray.
Pray.
People think praying is easy. Let me just tell you, it's hard. Mm-hmm. Especially if, let's say you're a monk and that's your job. Part of your job description is praying all day. I've done some of that. It's like, wow, is it exhausting? It really is. It takes a lot of effort. You're tired after you're done, but you poured it all out. All right. So you could pray. You needed at church on Sundays. If you wanted to show up, that'd be great. I know you go to your place, but we need you at our place too. Let's see what else. You watch sports, but
absolutely.
The Green Bay Packers, of course. There, Coach Lombardi, a Packers fan.
No, not really.
Giants,
Jets, unfortunately.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
Although they did beat the Dallas Cowboys,
They
I
did.
enjoyed that game.
So did I.
That was fantastic, and it's something interesting. We'll talk a little sports on. Thank God, it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but you'll find this interesting. Sam Darnold, his grandfather, was the first captain on Emergency. Remember that show, Squad 51, Engine 51? They had him for one season.
No kidding.
He was also the Marlboro Man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't know
He died of lung cancer, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
But I was like, wow. Me being like such a super geek and a fan of Emergency, I'm like, wow, how about that? First captain is his grandson's playing for the Jets.
Interesting fact.
Yeah, so there you go. And then I oftentimes, people, I guess when they get into that lonely moment and they start to get a little distraught, I guess what you could say is, Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy, which in really the original translation is really, Lord, love me. Lord can love you in ways that nobody else can love you, in very close ways. So there's some ways you can do that. If you have any sort of questions for either one of us,
Absolutely.
or if there's something that you always wanted to know about, or maybe you're going through some sort of loss yourself and you're trying to think how to regain your sanity. I'm not saying you're crazy, but regain your sanity is an expression. You can always text or call 626-559-1450. You can follow us at facebook.com/BigFatAmerican. Maybe one of these days we'll just do our own Thank God fan page on Facebook. We could do that. Maybe I'll show you how to do that.
Sure.
That'll be your job.
There you go.
And you can always check out the podcast, which are downloadable. Thank God. It's now on iTunes. So those are the places you can go find it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Tony, for stopping over.
My pleasure.
Again, follow us at facebook.com/BigFatAmerican. Thank God.